Hi, this is Mark with SimpleElectronicsCourses.com. Today I want to talk a little bit about the 7805 voltage regulator. You know, sooner or later, you're going to need 5 volts. If you're going to be tinkering around with electronics, sooner or later, you're going to need some 5 volts somewhere or another. So, I think the easiest way to do that, to get that, is to use the 7805 voltage regulator. It's a simple little part. It's got 3 pins on it. There's an input, an output, and a ground. And one of the things I like is you can take a wide range of input voltages, anywhere from 7 volts up to about 25 volts, although you do have to provide it with DC power, and it'll give you 5 volts out. Now, the big question is, where do you want to get your 7 to 25 volts at? Well, I think the quickest way to do it is to find yourself an AC power adapter. Now, if you're anything like me, you've got a box of power adapters. It looks kind of like this. Mine's not quite that messy, but it's real easy. You grab one of those and you can chop off the connector and use that for your input to this little circuit. Now, a couple things you have to watch out for. You got to make sure that it's more than 7 volts. You have to make sure that the adapter provides you with DC power, not AC power. You got to be careful because some of them provide AC. We need DC voltage, and it's got to be more than 7 volts, and also has to be able to provide enough current to provide whatever you want to be using your 5 volts for. So let's say, for example, you need 100 milliamps for whatever circuit you need to power with 5 volts. Well, you need a power adapter that's going to give you at least 100 milliamps, probably a little bit more, because the 7805 is going to take a little bit of current. So, bump it up by maybe another 10 or 15 milliamps just to be safe. This is what the circuit looks like. Super simple. So you can take your power adapter and use that to plug in across the 7 volts and the ground. You take your 7805 and you put a 0.33 microfarad capacitor between the input and the ground, and a 0.01 microfarad capacitor between the output and the ground, and presto changeo, you've got 5 volts coming out on the output. There are a few things you should probably think about though when worrying about 7805s. First thing is, you really have to have at least 7 volts DC input, which means you can't do something like use 4 batteries in series, which would give you 6 volts, 1.5 volts times 4, which would give you 6 volts. You got to have at least 7 volts. And you also should keep in mind that the higher your input voltage and the higher the current, the more heat you have to get rid of. Basically, the 7805 takes whatever the input voltage is and converts everything between that input voltage and 5 volts. It turns that into heat. And so the more current there is and the more voltage there is, the more heat you have to get rid of. So therefore, because you're wasting a bunch of power, the 7805 may not be the best solution if you have some low current application, something like running something off a battery for a long time. You probably wouldn't want to put a 7805 into somebody's pacemaker because it's going to have to run for a long time. 7805 comes in a couple different packages, several different packages actually. The one I usually normally think of is the TO220 package, which is shown on the top here. And those will provide you with about 1.5 amps of current at 5 volts. They also have some smaller packages, the TO92, which is shown there. They can also get it in a SOIC 8. Those are, I think, both probably around 100 milliamps. I think there's also maybe a 500 milliamp version that's probably in a TO220 package. So, if you need something besides 5 volts, there's a whole bunch of different options with the 78XX family. There's a 7808, 7810, 7812, 7815, 7824. And as you probably guessed, the last 2 digits are the output voltage. So if you need 12 volts, you can use a 7812. But you got to keep in mind that, again, your minimum input voltage is usually whatever your output is plus 2 volts. So for a 7812, you've got to have at least 14 volts on your input. You also don't have variable power. Sometimes you need to be able to tweak your voltage around. You need something more than 5 volts, or maybe you need 6.3 volts, or you need to be able to vary it. In that case, the 7805 isn't the part for you. There are some ways to take the 7805 and turn it into a variable power supply, but I prefer not to. Those are kind of hacks. There's better parts if you want to do that. You also can't blow these suckers up real easily. It's got overcurrent protection, so you can short it out and it will just go to its max current and stay there. It might get awful hot, but you're not going to accidentally blow it up by shorting something out for a little bit. There is one thing you have to keep in mind with 7805. You don't want to let the output voltage be higher than the input voltage. Now I know you're saying, how in the world would we ever have an output voltage be higher than an input voltage? But there are situations where, especially when you're powering down your circuit, if your input voltage drops very quickly, and maybe on your output voltage and your 5 volt side you have a large capacitor, so that holds up at 5 volts for a long time, then you can have a situation where the input voltage ends up being down at ground and your output voltage is still at 5 volts. That can cause a problem. So if you find yourself in that situation, you can take a diode and put it like we show here, and that way if the output voltage gets to be higher than the input voltage, the diode will kick in and it'll drain off your 5 volts, so you don't have to worry about that. That's about it for 7805. I'd appreciate if you happen to be watching on YouTube. If you like this video, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up or leave a comment. Or if you're watching it at simpleelectronicscourses.com, go ahead and leave a comment and let me know what you think. And I appreciate any feedback you might have. Or if you have other topics that you'd be interested in hearing about, please give me a shout and go ahead and leave a comment on the blog, and we'll come up with some more cool stuff for you to learn about. So thanks for your time and attention. We'll catch you next time.